Stygian Onslaught is back, and since I had the chance to play it before everyone else, I decided to prepare a guide to help you complete it. I will explain how this boss lineup works, the hidden mechanics that I found, and of course what works and what doesn't. The guide will focus on difficulty 5 and 6, because 4 and below use the same behavior as their overworld counterpart, and they are generally much easier. If any change happens between live and early access, I will pin a comment below, which also means that whatever you see working in this video definitely works for you. Builds here are just bad, to be honest. Lastly, since I tried to clear Dire with only C0 units, hopefully coming up will also be a video about that. But anyway, let's start. The first one, and possibly my favorite, is our old friend Aeonblight Drake. This is going to have about 6 million HP on difficulty 5 and almost 14 on 6, but its behavior is much different from what we're used to. The focus is not on hitting the weak point or carrying a bow user. You actually cannot hit its weak points, and it won't fly, as long as you're doing enough damage. The main focus instead is its resistance mechanic. This boss is divided into phases. When its HP reaches 75%, 50 or 25%, it will increase its resistance to the element that just dealt the most damage, by 200%. It will then start recording the damage that you deal from 75 to the next phase at 50%, and once it reaches that, it changes again to the new element you dealt the most damage with. So for example, if I deal a lot of hydro damage from 100% to 75%, it will activate a 200% resistance to hydro. Then from 75% to 50, let's say I deal most of my damage as Dendro. It will now swap its element to Dendro. You can tell which element it has by the announcement on the screen and its visual indication. You do not want to do damage to the element that it just absorbed. 200% even with resistance shred in the team is just too much. As long as the boss doesn't keep the same element for a very long time, it will stay on the ground. Failing to do so will make it fly, and when it does, it's pretty much time to reset, because not even here its weak points are actual weak points. You cannot break this boss down no matter what you do. This applies to the fly state, but also to the ground state, which also means you cannot manually disable the extra resistance it gets. Okay, so there are ways to think about this fight that I will explain in a second, but the main strategy here is to simply play teams that deal damage with more than one element, quite obviously. Hyper carry teams like Mavuka Melt or mono element teams will simply not work here. Even teams that technically do damage with multiple elements still need to do enough by themselves. Meaning that this Arlecchino Vape team will not be enough if Yelan has to basically solo half the boss. So what are these teams that split their damage more evenly between two or more elements? Well, actually some Hyperbloom team does that, especially with strong hydro damage dealers. But as we will see on the second boss, you are unlikely to use this strategy here. So let's look at other teams. Well, first off, we can adapt some of the carry teams we are used to by giving up on buffs for more damage of the second element. A Vaporite's team can still work when it's a double Hydro setup, and the support, instead of providing buffs to just one unit, for example Bennett here, is a unit that provides buffs to both elements. A Mavuka or Varesa team can work just fine when, well, they are together. You will play mostly Varesa with off-field Pyro when the boss is Pyro resistant, and you will play on-field Mavuka with Electro Field when it's Pyro resistant. Or we could even think about a dumb team like dual carry Raiden and Mavuka, and somehow it works. Now yes, Shivers is a great teammate and she's C6 in the clip you're seeing, but let me say something. You will literally laugh at my builds. Remember that this video is shot on the early access server. No build is good. My Raiden CV sucks and my Mavuka has like 30 crit rate before Codex. No crowns and I have 300 MS. But enough excuses. This team can technically clear. We are alternating between two elements in an efficient way, and that's all we need. Another very similar team that can do this is Kirk with double Hydro. We can on-field Yelan so that she gets her own damage percentage buff, and we have Rest Red and buffs. Hydro damage is in no way as high as Cryo, but it works. Other similar concepts of dual elements can be applied, especially when Mavuka is present, since she can work so well as a main and a side damage dealer. The perfect examples are Molani and Kinich teams. But don't force it too much with other archetypes. Weekend teams with 2 Geo units can still clear but require higher investment. It also helps the small delay that there is between the boss changing phases. That's where we can continue doing damage until it actually gets the resistance. And finally, another strategy is using a third element doing damage. This element will never do the most damage, but that's good because it means he will play for the entire fight without facing higher resistance. For example, an Electro unit like Fischl in a Vape team. One last thing we can discuss is Chaska, our favorite rainbow DPS that will often see 3 elements on the team and often prefers off-field damage. She will always face some resistance, but 2/3 of her damage will not, and that's what we're aiming for. I kind of like this boss. There seems to be quite a number of teams and weird things we can do to clear the Fearless stage, and I'm confident that higher difficulty 6 is possible with the right C0 characters. Let's move on to the second boss, the Rock Crab. This might be the easiest boss out of the 3 for a lot of people, and you definitely do not need Lauma for it, although I have an interesting trick for her. So what this boss does is start the fight with a shield while summoning many seeds. The entire fight revolves around the seeds. You need to deal bloom related damage to them so that they explode and chip on the shield. Not doing this in time will make the crab start an attack that one-shots whoever is on field. Now, emphasis on bloom related damage. The seeds don't just need the reaction to happen, but need to be hit by such reactions. So Hyper Bloom directly hitting, Lunar Bloom directly hitting, Bloom cores exploding on them, and finally Burgeon. But don't try this last one. Pyro damage is something you absolutely want to avoid in this fight. Dealing pyro to them technically works, but in return they will deal a ton of damage to you. Like, really a lot. Do avoid this element in this fight. I honestly don't know what Burgeon did to HoYo, cause I'm starting to think they just dislike it. Anyway, the shield phase will be at the start and then happen again after around 70 to 80 seconds. Aside from the shield, the fight is very straightforward and the boss doesn't really do anything special and also doesn't have that much HP, holding less than 6 million on the difficulty 5 and not even 10 in difficulty 6. The only specific we need to cover is the fact that even without the shield phase, it will still spawn extra seeds and whatever Hyper Bloom or Bloom damage you're dealing to them will actually increase and go directly to the main boss. Meaning that not only you don't lose on the damage, but you also get it amplified. And I probably don't need to say much about which team works and which doesn't. The damage amp for the reaction is nice, but the main point is that having Hydra and Dendro is quite literally mandatory to pass the shield phase. A very basic Hyper Bloom team can deal with this boss if Hyper Bloom is not strictly the only source of damage that you have. There will be probably some crazy cheap clear that I cannot replicate on the early access server, but generally do try to aid the reaction damage with talent damage from your characters. Great examples are Double Hydro for Hyper Bloom or Novilat teams. The only issue that Bloom and Hyper Bloom teams face is that the seeds take a bit of time to deal with. For Bloom, you need to wait for them to explode, for Hyper Bloom you need to create them and then Hyper Bloom them, and instead for Bountiful cores from Nilo, it's much easier, but you still need to apply both Hydro and Danger to all of them. Guess instead who can directly deal Bloom related damage to all of them and with just a single cast? Well, Lauma is obviously fantastic here. Put yourself in the middle, hold their skill, Lunar Bloom damage to all of them, popping the shield instantly. Not only that, when not in the shield phase, still do try to destroy as many seeds as possible with your old skill, as not only you will still do damage to the main body, since it's AoE, but you will also get the seeds to amplify all that Lunar Bloom damage and deal it once again to the boss. It's actually quite insane how much damage you can get out of doing this, and I wonder if the strategy to really min-max this fight is to focus on your crit stats slightly more for this mechanic. But honestly, any Lauma team, whether it's Novilat, Hyper Bloom or Nilo, is just going to make this boss an absolute joke. Lastly, Nilo, even without Lauma, can deal with this boss and is going to work fairly well. No team is as strong as Lauma can make it, but many are more than enough to get your rewards. Let's now go look at another completely new boss. The Fireblade Shock Trooper is the boss with the highest HP we will face and the most amount of mechanics. So, as soon as the fight starts, he gets 3 layers of shields. Each will be 4.5% of his max HP, but they take much increased damage from Electro Charged, Lunar Charged and Electro, and has extra resistance for every element, except Electro. And if it wasn't clear enough that you need Electro for this boss, then the shield also heals itself constantly unless you deal Electro Charged or Lunar Charged, after which it will still heal but much more slowly. Finally, breaking the shield will decrease every resistance to normal, except Electro going down even lower. And each time a shield is broken, he will lose 6% of its HP and also give you energy. Failing to break all 3 shields will make him unleash a really strong sequence of Electro hits, and generally this boss can hit pretty hard, both with Pyro and Electro attacks. Now, the real problem with the shield is that it regenerates really fast, and even with a strong damage dealer, unless we're looking at constellations, it's really hard to up base. Plus, it's all time wasted, as the damage of the shield is fixed and you just want to deal with it as fast as possible. The short story here is that Hydro plus Electro is ideal if not necessary. Also ideal is focusing on Electro damage instead of Hydro or other sources. Now, here there are some nuances, as it's easier to ignore the buffs to Electro than the necessity of Electro Charged, meaning that as long as your team has enough damage and simply has Electro Charged, then it might be good enough. But here another problem comes out, and that's the fact that the shield doesn't make you do damage and it starts right away. And this makes Favonius weapons stop working as soon as it's up, and characters that require energy to apply their element simply cannot do their job. Characters like Raiden, Yelan and Xingqiu actually have a problem with this. You can still build a ton of energy and force them, but ideally you apply your element and do damage right away. Inef, Official, Furina and similar characters can do this fairly well in contrast. And it goes without saying that this boss, if you're able to play a Chlorent or even better but a Electro Charge team, should not be a big problem for you. Novilette can also tackle it, but it becomes harder and Inefa starts to be wanted. On the other side, many, if not most Inefa teams that can keep Luna charged up will be able to clear this encounter. Unfortunately, between the pretty strong attacks it has and all the extra perks to Luna charged, she is obviously really strong. And I believe this boss does not have a big pool of teams that you can make. And lastly, for anyone pulling for Flints, well, if you struggle here, you might as well wait for him. It's also pretty much his boss. Once again, I will likely follow up with another video where I try to clear the Dire stage using C0 units and sharing more insight from a stronger account. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like or a sub, and by the way, thank you so much for 20k. I'll see you guys in the next video.